Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be talking about something that I think is of great interest to a lot of our listeners, and that is that process of what is known as manifesting. This is a process where you bring the spiritual and material together. Today we're going to learn how we can discover the body's energetic centers known as chakras, which offer a sacred map for manifestation. We can learn how to make use of the top-down flow of energy between chakras to manifest desires with our highest good. On our program today, someone who has been studying for more than 40 years about this particular system. She's going to share with us today about how we can actually use our very own centers to be able to get the things that we desire and, again, that align with our life's purpose. Our guest has been called a prophet for our time. She is a groundbreaking thought leader who is the founder and director of what is known as Sacred Centers, and she is a writer, therapist, and spiritual teacher. I'd like to welcome back to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Anodea Judith. Anodea, thank you for joining us back here on the program.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm delighted to be here.
I'll bet when you conduct workshops that this is something that people really get excited about, don't they?
Well, they certainly get excited when they start busting through their blocks and realize that the creative process is just ecstasy when the blocks don't get in the way.
Well, that's for sure. Tell us about this chakra system that you've been studying for so long and how you came to see it in a way of being able to manifest one's desires, again, in line with their life's purpose.
Well, I've studied the chakras for 45 years now, and typically people think of them as a process or a map for the human journey that is a map to higher consciousness, which of course it is. And there are 7 chakras in the body that move from our earthly concerns of survival, sexuality, emotions, power, to our more lofty connections, our transpersonal connections of vision and consciousness. And I call that the current of liberation. But as I work with the chakras over the past 4 decades, I realized that everything that goes up must come back down. And if you look in the old text, they actually describe the chakras as condensing chambers that condense the energy of consciousness into its various levels of manifestation. And so when I looked at it that way, I realized it was a profound map for manifesting that begins in highest consciousness. And of course, anything we manifest begins with an idea. And we have to think of it first. And then on subsequent levels, going down the chakras, getting denser and more specific at each level until we manifest it fully on the earth plane. So I call that the current of manifestation.
Now, it's interesting as you put it that way because I remember there was a guest I interviewed a lot of years ago, and she was one who was a specialist in helping people come to understand and have a good relationship with money and to use it intentionally. And she was talking about the whole idea of manifestation where you have this idea, as you said, and she says, that's in what's known as the metaphysical plane. And what you want to do is bring it from there down to the reality plane. I can't think of another word to use there, but
that's just reality.
Yeah. And she says, and that's where you have sometimes what's called trouble at the border, because as you leave it there or as you're bringing it from that metaphysical to the material reality, maybe some of those things, as you were talking about, get in the way, and so it may come to you, but not in a way that you expected or not quite the way you would hoped. Now, what is it that is going on there? You talked about blocks earlier.
Yeah. Well, here's a way to look at it. As we go from the upper planes to the lower planes, at each step we enter a plane that has more density. It's sort of like, a meteor can be out in empty space, and then when it hits the atmosphere, it hits something with a little more density. And then if it goes through the atmosphere and it hits the ocean, well, the water has more density than the atmosphere. And if it goes all the way to the bottom of the ocean and it hits the earth, that has more density than the water. So in the same way that, we can think of anything, we got lots of ideas. Then we try to imagine it, and sometimes some of those ideas fall away. Oh, I just can't really imagine that ever happening. And then we go to talk about it, and we say, well, I can imagine it, but I can't speak about it. So at each level all the way down, what we meet is a bit of resistance. And that is actually natural. But a lot of people give up when they meet that resistance because they don't have the tools to work through it.
Now, back to the chakras again, most people might think of these as something that provides a path to a higher consciousness that you use to climb up the spine, but as we're talking about here, and in your book, Creating on Purpose, you go the downward path. Now, I know that we've touched on this, but let's lend some clarity on that so people get a better grasp. Oh, that's what she's talking about.
Yeah, well, let me just briefly describe the 7 steps of the downward path, and that makes more sense. And I like to take an example. Let's say you want to build a house, and that's what you want to manifest. And you could apply this to anything, starting a business, a family, a neighborhood project, something for the world, writing a book. But let's just take building a house. So first of all, you have to have the idea to build the house. You have to think of it. And if you want to build a house, you're probably going to start thinking of it for quite a while before you actually start manifesting it. But when you have the idea in your mind, you start to visualize. And you imagine, I'd like it to be this big, and I'd like it to have windows looking out on the view, and I'd like it to be brown shingle or made of stone, or, you start to imagine. And you also look at houses. If you're thinking of building a house and you go to visit somebody, you go, oh, that's really nice what they did in their kitchen. And you start noticing and seeing things. So that brings us to the 6th chakra. So 7th chakra is the idea, it's consciousness. And then so once you've imagined it enough, you're ready to go talk to an architect. And this is communication. This is the 5th chakra. And you'll say to the architect, well, here's what I want to build. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm seeing in my mind. And the back and forth that you'll have with the architect will refine your idea even more. And the architect may say, well, you can't do that for the amount of money you have in your budget, but you could do this. And so through a lot of back and forth conversation, the details get clarified. And of course, as soon as you're talking to the architect and you start to bring it into manifestation, you come down into the heart chakra where you realize you have to have a lot of relationships. You need a relationship with a real estate agent to buy the land. You need a relationship, of course, with the architect, with, a contractor, with all the people that are going to work on building the house, with your wife who is going to be part of the project with you, with your neighbors that are going to put up with all the trucks coming in and out. So there's lots of relationships that we need to manifest any project, the heart chakra. Then we come down to the 3rd chakra, and this is where a lot of people get stuck. There are things you have to do. It's not just thinking about it. You have to, get up off your butt and go out and do things. So,
can I interrupt you just for a moment? And it's interesting. I like what you're saying here, and it reminds me. We had a lady who we had on the program a few times back when we first started our radio show, and she was one that basically helps people learn how to do their own bookkeeping. I mean, that's an important step. If you're not paying attention to the money, then forget about it. It just isn't going to happen. And I really loved and I love saying this, it was a quote she just kind of came up with on her own, but she says, you can't just go and intend something and leave it up all to God. He's going to want you to write checks. And that's exactly what it sounds like you're saying here in a way.
Yeah. I mean, we have to do our thinking part of it, but the thinking part of it won't manifest it all by itself.
Because it reminds me of back when, movies like The Secret and What the Bleep Do We Know? And in fact, we actually talked with one of the key people that put together The Secret. And he says, I agree with what we're talking about here. And I was saying, it seemed to focus, on money too much, but it also seemed to give the impression, although if you go back and see it again, you understand that it wasn't what you thought it was at first, is the impression that you could just sit around with the power of intention to track everything. And I'm thinking, no, you got to move towards something in order to make it real. And that's exactly what you're talking about here.
Yeah, there's a quote in the book of, we can make castles in the air, but we have to put a foundation under them.
Yeah, the sand's got to land somewhere, doesn't it?
If I just finish this process here, in the 3rd chakra, we plan out what we have to do. And some people feel overwhelmed with a big project because they don't put things in order. But if you take one thing at a time and you have a logical order to what you do, it's easier to get your will on track and to do the things you need to do. And then after all that work, we get to the second chakra, which is about pleasure and fun, and we look at how do you make your project more fun? What will make it really appealing to you? You know, this could be if the house, it's picking out the colors and the drapes and the carpet. That can be the fun part because it's creative. And you go, what would I like? What would really feel good? So when you get that, that's the element water connected with the second chakra. That puts you in the flow, puts you in the river. And then finally we get down to the earth plane, which is chakra 1, where we put definite things on our calendar and we have all the steps worked out. And if you complete each step all the way to the end, you will complete your manifestation. So we teach people to ground. We teach people to pull things all the way down from the top, to be very specific about what they want. Could be as specific as saying, I need a certain amount of money for this. One time in a workshop, someone said, I want to go to graduate school and become a therapist. And she decided in the workshop that, she figured out she needed $60,000 to go to graduate school, which she didn't have any of. And she did all the work in the workshop, and within 2 weeks of that, 2 people offered her money to go to school that totaled exactly $60,000.
That brings up to me something that I've always been curious about. How come sometimes things seem to work out effortlessly? Let's say that you have your wishes, desires, and then other times it just seems like no matter how hard you try, it just doesn't seem to want to work. Is there just a difference in effort, or what's going on there? Because you talk about being in the flow as you got into that lower chakra there, and that sort of is one of those areas I would think where people realize, I'm thinking this and it's just happening. How come it's so easy? But then other times it just seems like that falls away, that serendipity, and it's just not there. What's going on, do you think?
Well, people always ask me about that in this class because often when something is not working out, they say, well, it's not meant to be, right? Maybe I'm not supposed to have this relationship or this job or move to this city. And sometimes that's the case, and sometimes it's just that you're hitting an obstacle. Now, obstacles are put there to teach us something. They're put there to evoke some power that we haven't developed. And there's a poem by Rumi about God playing chess, teaching you to play chess. And it says, if God was teaching you to play chess, where would he put the pieces? He wouldn't put them where they're easy. He would put them where you have to learn something. So many times it's just obstacles. And we say that the difference between a successful manifester and one who doesn't is not the number of obstacles. If you have a really big project, you want to start a company, you're going to have a lot of obstacles. But the successful manifester knows how to handle the obstacles and not be stopped by them. Now, I say all that knowing that at times something might not be meant to be. And I'll give you an example with myself. I was renting a house with an option to buy, and I really loved the house. It was a beautiful place on top of a hill. It was a stretch for me financially, but it was just when the book came out, and I thought, okay, this is a test in my powers of manifestation. So I got the guy to give me 6 months to scrape together the down payment and the financing and buy the house. And so, me and my friends prayed on it, and I did all the work, and I took the steps with the bank, and I was gathering my money and managing my finances. And the 6 months was up on a weekend, and I had an event there that weekend, so I decided I would call him on Monday. And I pretty much had gotten my ducks in a row. And so I called him on Monday, and I said, I think I can swing it. We want to buy the house. He said, sorry, the 6 months was up on Saturday, and I'm raising the price by $200,000.
Oh, boy.
And that put it out of the question for me.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't possibly do that. It was going to be a stretch anyway. And so I was devastated. I did all my manifestation work. This is supposed to work. What happened? What did I do wrong? And what happened was that I had all my ducks in a row. So I started looking for another house. I found a house nearby that was much better, that was actually bigger, that had a pool, that had a big view, that had space that I could rent out something. It was $400,000 cheaper, and it had been on the market for a while. It was a fixer-upper. But because I had all my ducks in a row, I could jump on it right away. And I realized that the house I'm in now is far better than that house would have been.
You bring up a point that that people, I think, are aware of sometimes, and that is where you were going in one direction, or perhaps a bit of adversity, and we're not saying in your case it is, but can come into your life and move you into a direction. You realize at the end that you came out better than where you were. And I believe that if you really paid attention to your thinking back during those times, that you would see, yeah, your intention was there, maybe you weren't working for it, but you kind of took the long route. How often have you seen adversity actually change people's direction in a way that they said, I'm so glad this happened. At the time, I just couldn't see it, but for crying out loud, in the end, I'm feeling I was way better off now than I was back in the day.
I think it's almost always the case that if something is barred from us, that's because something better is in the works. But the thing that's important in this is that you keep your intention going in the same direction, and you don't get overly attached to the details. You know, let's say somebody wants to manifest a relationship, and they could get overly attached to saying this person needs to be at least 6 feet tall, and they need to be 42 years old and have brown hair and brown eyes and, you know, yada, yada. And that might not be the right person. But if they keep their intention clear on the essence of what they want, it might come with somebody with blonde hair, and it might come with somebody, you know, a little different than they expect that might be more perfect. So we have to keep our mind on the parts that are really important and essential, non-negotiable. And we have to let go of the other details, because I believe and have experienced that Spirit kind of figures that out even better than you can imagine.
I remember years ago, somebody had made a suggestion to me about reading the Bible, which I haven't done in a long time, but they suggested what you want to do is each day wake up, just open it up randomly, and then read what's right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you can get into that habit, then what you do after that is you do the same thing just before going to bed. You just open it up randomly, boom, and you read what's right in front of you. And there was something I read, and it really was in line with what you were just saying there. And I think it was in Romans. And it says, the idea of your desires, why manifest those desires, sort of as it's a quote from God, I guess, is that I want to give you the experience that desire brings to you.
Exactly.
And so when you think of that adversity, you could see that really maybe you possibly intended that so you could get that strength as you were talking about, or those necessary tools, whatever it may be, to get that thing you were looking for, because that thing you were looking for is the experience that it brings you. And that's a different way to look at manifestation, I would think.
Yeah, and it's the experience that's important, and I would even call that essence, you know? I mean, the person...
Better word.
The guy with brown hair, you know, might find that, you know, he looks just like that, but he's a bore.
Right.
Very kind, or, you know, something doesn't quite work. So, you know, we want to go for the essence, the things that are really important, and let the details work themselves out.
Now, as you're working through each of the chakras to bring your metaphysical reality down to the material reality, if you will, now, are there areas that a person in a particular chakra may experience a block that they realize, Jesus, I'm bringing this down through this system as you're talking about here, Anodea. I'm discovering now what's keeping me from having that thing, and kind of do you guide them to become more aware and look into that area, maybe nurture or heal that or get it energized? What is the process there exactly?
Yeah, so in the workshop, we help people through the blocks at each level that create the resistance. And so they're different at each chakra. So in the 7th chakra, the blocks are in our belief system. So if you want to manifest money, for example, but you have an interior belief that you might not even be completely aware of, that you're not worthy, that belief is going to get in the way of you manifesting money. If you want to manifest a relationship and you believe you're not lovable on some level, and it could be your conscious mind doesn't think that, but left over from childhood, you felt rejected, you felt unlovable, that belief is going to block your manifestation. So we have a belief closet process that was created by my co-author, Lion Goodman, and we help people clear the negative beliefs and create positive beliefs. In the sixth chakra, we also work with intention, clarifying your intention, because often, we say, I intend to go on a diet, but I also intend to, lay in bed in the morning and not go to the gym, and, we have lots of conflicting intentions, so we help people clarify that. Visualize the obstacles and moving them out of the way. In the fifth chakra, the blockage tends to come from negative self-talk, inner critic that says, whoa, you think you're going to do that? Who are you to do that? You're too old.
Right.
You don't have the experience, whatever. And we help people basically move that critic out and replace it with something that is more helpful. We call that the 7 Voices exercise. It's really fun. In the heart, we have a wonderful meditation of going for your true heart's desire that moves, blocks out. But we work on, again, clarifying your intention and belief about whether you can manifest love, whether you treat people lovingly. We have a really fun exercise in the third chakra where someone lists a task that's part of their plan. Let's say somebody wants to get their body in shape. So part of what they have to do is work out at a gym 4 days a week. So we have them write that on top of the page and then write down all the excuses why they wouldn't. I just want to stay in bed. I hate going to the gym. There's no gyms in my neighborhood.
Or I did some workout yesterday. I'll take the day off and double up the next day.
See me in my workout clothes. So then we have a person in the workshop impersonate every one of those obstacles. And we line them up in a line between where they wrote down their goal and where the participant is standing, and they have to get to their goal by going through all those obstacles that are going to get in their face and say, you just want to stay in bed. And they have to really confront that and move that obstacle aside. And what it does is it really strengthens the will. Once you can do that in the workshop, you can do it when you're sitting at your desk or whatever. You know what the voices are that are going to come up. In the second chakra, it's blockages to being able to ask for what we really want and being able to state that clearly. So we have an exercise around that. And in the first chakra, it's just, resistance to well-being, the ability to have something that you can really feel worthy enough to have it, and the resistance to making things specific and sticking to it. Like, I will do that Thursday morning between 10 and 12. I will make 5 cold calls to find supporters for, my play or whatever it is. So there's blocks at each chakra, and that's just a few of them that we work with. But when you move those out of the way, then the process of manifestation has less resistance. And I will say that in my own life, working this process for, I've been teaching this workshop for about 15 years, I'm amazed at how quickly manifestation is happening. I was working on a book, and I did a meditation of who do I want to have publish it, and I decided Hay House would, and I went online, and I couldn't find anybody to send it to. There was no, nothing that I could find, so I just affirmed it, and 2 weeks later, out of the blue, Hay House contacted me on their own about a book.
Well, how do you like that?
Yeah. So I've done one with them, and I'm now doing my second one that's due at the end of March, and, that was exactly, it just manifests. And I have many other stories like that of things that are just like happening. I have sort of a 2-week window, it seems, from when I put something out there or mock it up, so to speak, and before it appears in some form.
We're also in a time, too, and this was from a guest that we had on the program where she was talking about we're in a time which is we're approaching or moving into the 5th dimension. And it was really an interesting conversation because she was talking about, and I had been experiencing these things, that people will see as they think about something that it's going to come at them pretty fast. That, whatever it may be, a desire, or whatever the case is, especially if you have things clear as what we're talking about here today. And I was realizing, how right in some ways, in an eerie way, that was. I didn't mean to think that, but there it is right in front of me, and I really didn't want that experience, but there it was. Yeah. And I kind of feel weird. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we can manifest negative experiences, too, with our
Exactly.
thoughts. Nobody's going to want me, or there's so many people applying for this job, there's certain I'll never get it. There's no good men out there. And if you keep thinking those things, then that's what you're going to create.
I remember helping someone's daughter one time get into a possible starting job at a really nice restaurant in downtown. And, all she had to do was fill out the application, and then I said, after that, you're going to go up and you talk to this manager right here, and you're going to be set up for an interview. But I was setting it up in such a way that she was really making her effort. I was opening the door, but you got to make your own effort as well. And that was exactly the kind of comments I was hearing from her as well. Well, what if they don't hire me, and there's this, and this? And I said, do you just expect things in your life not to work out? Because if you do, that's exactly how it's going to be.
Yeah. There's a saying that whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right.
Absolutely true. Now, I bet that's probably pretty exciting when people take your workshops, isn't it? Real eye-openers for people.
They get really excited because things start to become possible. And we really get people to go for their dreams. Like, what is a dream you have always had to manifest? I'm really into teaching people with big dreams. I think that at this point in the world, we desperately need people who can step out of their little individual bubble and come back with some service and help change this world. And we need a lot of successful manifestors to be able to create a new world that is livable and a world that works. And so that's my dream. I think we're here to create heaven on earth. And I need lots of people to know how to manifest, because I can't do that by myself.
No, we need a lot of vibration energy, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've got to ask you, as you've been in this process here, for your own manifestation, what has been something that you have manifested that simply astounded you by the time it happened?
Well, a few things. One, we have a process that in the workshop, and it's also in the book, where we invite people to dream in 12, 13 different areas of their life, like home and family, career, money, health, spiritual growth, community service, vacation and play, all these different categories. And so, of course, I had to do my own exercise, and I realized that I had not really been paying attention to the vacation and play. And I hadn't had a real vacation in about 5 years. I travel a lot, and I sometimes tack a day or two onto a trip, but I hadn't, planned a vacation. And so I sat down and I said, where do I want to go? And I'd always wanted to go to India. I'd been raising kids, and I couldn't, and now my kids were grown. And, again, within a couple of weeks, I got this email inviting me to come and present a day-long workshop at a conference in India, and they'd pay my way there, and they'd pay me to do the presentation, and that was enough money to have me spend a whole month touring India, and that was the manifestation that I got out of finally being clear that I hadn't put attention there and putting attention on what I wanted. Another one is, the book with Hay House, that just came through. There's been other things, sometimes just something small. Oh, I need to talk to so-and-so, and they call. So as you clear the blocks, that process gets quicker and quicker.
I remember years ago as I first broke into radio, I went to it was a Toastmasters meeting, I believe it was, and it was one downtown. It was really interesting because I went to that as an internal way to prove to myself that I was worthy. You talked about that earlier, how people might think that they're unworthy of their desires.
Yep.
And it was through an adversity that actually made me feel inside, I need to go and find a particular group that I feel would be the upper echelon, that I feel worthy to belong part of, because I felt that I was a pretty good talker. Now, as I was there, I wasn't even thinking about I was thinking about getting into radio, but I really didn't know how to get started outside of the small little community radio station that was in town. And anyway, this gentleman stood up and he said, or was given a small speech about how he wanted to be the world's greatest radio interviewer. Mm-hmm. I thought, well, that's interesting. So after the Toastmasters group here, I went up and I talked with him, and I said, so you're in radio, is that right? He says, yeah. And I said, I've been wanting to get into that. And he says, well, I'll tell you what, if you're willing to volunteer some of your time, you can go down to Oregon Public Broadcasting, which is part of the PBS network. you talk to this gentleman right here and tell him what your desires are, what you want to do, and go from there. So I said, okay, sure. So I gave this gentleman a call, and we went down, we met, and he says, so what do you want to do? And I said, well, I've always wanted to be in radio. I always pictured myself as a disc jockey like the L.A. Shock Jacks, back in the 1970s, Wolfman Jack and so forth, spinning records and just, talking on the air about my favorite music, whatever. And he says, well, here's what we've got going on here. And he says, if you're really interested in getting started to be a host, he says, why don't you try this? I've got this guest coming in today on this particular book here, and you can sit down for 30 minutes and you can interview him on what the book's about. I said, oh, okay, well, that sounds interesting enough. So I had a couple of hours to kill, so I sat and I read as much of the book as I could. We opened up the interview. I did my little introduction. Again, this was my first sort of live on-air broadcast. And the next thing you know, I watched this guy light up because he realized I'd actually read a fair amount of his book. And he really got into the conversation. It was like I pushed open this button. And in the back of my mind as this was happening, I'm thinking, well, how many times has this guy been on a television or radio interview where anybody actually did any kind of homework on the kind of work that he was out there promoting? And he was excited about it because he realized I had. The next thing you know, I'm thinking, man, this is cool. I never thought about myself as being a radio host who interviews people, much like what we're doing today. And then I took a look at the calendar, and there were these heavy-hitting guests that I realized, well, I wonder if I could talk to this person. They're going to be in town next week. And so I talked with this guy who says, you can interview anybody you want to on this calendar. And I was like, you're kidding me. I mean, these were people that were on the major networks, television, Oprah, all of it. They were there. And I literally got in my car that day, and I started driving away and realizing, I can't believe I've hit my dream this fast. Now, it was a volunteer. I wasn't being paid for it, but I was there that fast.
Yeah.
And then I was good at it. Now, I think in light of what we've been talking about, that the manifestation, besides those blocks, that if we can clear those, that some of those manifestations probably take time because, as you said earlier, we may not have the tools or the skills that prepare us or make us ready for that. But in my case, I had that skill. I'd been developing it for years. I just never really applied it in the direction where I wanted to, like what we're doing today. Mm-hmm. And would you say that that's the reason why some manifestations come faster than others?
Well, some manifestations, we are more aligned with them, and they're easier. And some are a real stretch, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't do the ones that are a real stretch.
Well, no, not at all, because you grow from them.
Yeah, like someone might be able to manifest a job easier than they can manifest getting their body in shape.
We're really hitting on those January things, aren't we? Yeah, I bet you have a lot of people that come in for that reason. I really want to stick with my intentions for the new year, but I always seem to falter after about 30 days or less.
Yeah, but see, if we get people to really have a plan and to get behind their plan and to make it realistic, the goal has to be realistic. Some people set up something that's unrealistic, and they set themselves up for failure. Oh, I'm going to lose 20 pounds the first week. No, you're not.
Right. Or I'm going to start exercising, and they burn out because they tried running 3 miles right off the bat, and you haven't ran in how many years?
Yeah, exactly. So we need to, make it realistic. We call them SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic or relevant, and time-based. And, many of the things that I find is that when people go to manifest, they're too vague about what they want. Say, oh, well, I just want to get in shape. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean you want to be able to press 150 pounds? Does it mean you need to lose 30 pounds? If so, by when? How are you going to do it? What's that going to take? What kind of diet are you going on? What kind of gym are you going to, how many days a week? All right, I'm going to work out 3 days a week for 40 minutes each day. All right, that's doable, But is it doable if there's no place to work out near where they live? No, it's not. So we have to make sure they're very specific, they're measurable. If you say, I want to lose 30 pounds, you can measure that. When you get on the scale if you are 30 pounds less. People just say, I want to manifest some money. Well, that's really vague. Or and it also has to be something that your psyche really gets excited about. Somebody said, well, I just want to manifest a job I don't hate. And I said, no, that's not it. Right?
Right. They always say something other than what they want.
Exactly. You want to manifest a job you love and put everything in there, decent hours, good pay, getting to dress up in fabulous clothes, whatever's important to you. Meet people. Manifest a job that you love, not one you don't hate. So, or a relationship with somebody I can at least stand. Well, no, that's not a dream.
They're like you hear about, I remember watching one of those television sitcoms, and they were on the subject of online dating. And it was pretty impressive how low the standards seem to be when it comes to online dating. Well, just at least have a job and possibly a car. Okay, yeah, that's the kind of man I want in my life.
Yeah.
Funny stuff. So how can people go about getting your book, finding out about your workshops, things like that?
Well, I have a workshop coming up starting next Monday, actually, at Kripalu Yoga Center on Creating on Purpose. And I will be doing the same workshop again in New Orleans the very last day of March and the first 3 days of April. And I also have an online course version of it that you can download from my website, sacredcenters.com or anodeajudith.com, called Creating on Purpose, and it can be a self-paced. And you can also learn the process from the book. Now, the book will tell you all the theory and list the exercises, but the live workshop gives you some experience in the exercises that I can't do in a book, like lining everybody up to impersonate your obstacles. That's a visceral, physical experience.
You remind me of a time when I was talking with actress Dee Wallace. People who may not remember her might remember the movie E.T. the Extraterrestrial. She played the mother in that.
Oh,
and
okay.
It was really fascinating in her book. She was talking about a particular acting coach, kind of considered the Zen guru of acting coaches, I guess. And as I was reading through that chapter, here these people take these workshops, and in acting workshops, for anybody who's ever been involved even slightly in the performing arts, you do these exercises and things that you normally wouldn't do. And I realized how often a person might be able to break out of those little snags they have if they took acting classes, because you're really having to bury yourself. And it sounds like that's what a good workshop like yours really probably helps people do, doesn't it?
Well, it just, they get contagious. It's contagious from the other people kind of bursting one at a time, like little light bulbs going on. And there's an energy that picks up that lets you really dream of the possible. It opens possibilities. And so people get really excited as they start to manifest. And I have found over the years, I have to say, all right, when you go home, if you get what your dream is, write me an email and tell me. And, people say, oh, I met the love of my life. I bought a house, and I didn't even think I could because I didn't have the down payment. And, I manifested the perfect job. I mean, it's amazing, some of the stories that I've heard over the years.
I think that's why people get drawn to those inspiring movies as well. They hear and see a story where there seems to be overwhelming adversity, or someone who really has a dream, like Rudy, who wanted to play for the Notre Dame football team, and he was a nobody just walking on, and eventually he got that opportunity. And they inspire us because they make us realize these things are possible, and even furthermore, if somebody else can do it, well, so can I, right?
Exactly, exactly. Why not me?
And it's very energizing, too. Anodea, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the program today. For our listeners, go ahead and give out that website again and where they can find your book and the title, of course.
Yeah, well, they can always go to my name, anodeajudith.com, ANODEAJUDITH.com. And my other website that I've had for years is sacredcenters.com. Remember, the chakras are sacred centers in the body. And sacredcenters.com also has my full schedule. And there's creatingonpurpose.net, which is a website exactly on this book.
Oh, very good. Anodea, thank you so much today for bringing in a very unique approach to how people can bring that metaphysical reality down to a material reality. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the program today.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you to all the listeners.
We want to thank you, the listener out there, for tuning in. You can also discover more by visiting us at Beyond50Radio.com. That is the number 50. We encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter and stay up to date on what's going on in the world of Beyond 50 as well as upcoming programs. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.